Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, conservative talk and awesome rock. And of course, I am your host, Christopher Mader. And the candidate interviews are rolling on here on the Meat and Potatoes 2012 Conservative Media Network with my latest guest, and he's running out of the 18th Worcester District, looking to unseat the seated Ryan Fatman is there. That's right?
Right. Yep.
Right. He's a Sutton resident. He's got a bachelor and a master's in history and political science from Worcester State College. He's got a law degree from the Mass School of Law, and he's passed his bar exam in 2011. He teaches at Nichols and Quinsigamond College and is a member of the Republican Town Committee of Sutton and was elected to the school committee in 2009. He is a Gold and NRA Life member, and I want to welcome Jesse Limanek. Thank you, sir.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
Great. So, first question. What made you get into this? We were talking earlier about that. It's a big wide open race now. So why don't you go ahead and tell us what made you get into this? What's happening?
It really is. I learned around the time that Ryan Fatman, who's the current incumbent, decided to launch his effort to unseat the current senator, Richard Moore, that he was basically pulling papers and which would result in an open seat.
Right.
When I learned about that, I had been contemplating, as some of us tend to do, what to do with my life in terms of politics. As you mentioned, I'm a two-term member of the Sutton School Committee, and I found in that position that school committees in the Commonwealth can only do so much.
Right.
And I see significant limitations imposed, primarily by Beacon Hill. So around that time, I started saying, something, I really want to do more for my community, and I only can do so much in this role. So I reached out to Ryan and said, I'm thinking about doing something more.
Yeah, he's moving up to state senate now.
He's moving up. Exactly. So Ryan basically said, hey, why don't we meet? We'll have a cup of coffee and let's talk. So it's at that point when he told me his intentions on running. So I initially was thinking of simply going after a selectman seat. But when I learned that Ryan was running, okay, this is something that I had been interested in.
That position's open.
Yeah, absolutely. So why not give it a shot? Of course, I had to check with the boss first. Had a conversation with my lovely wife Arlene and my children to kind of let them know this was something that I was pondering and if this is something that they would.
The wife is the boss and the children are the board members.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems that, as we know, they all have veto power.
Right.
And all veto power. Exactly.
I love it. That's great.
So we had a good conversation. They said, something, why don't you try? And that's one of the reasons why I would pull papers. I want to try. I've been teaching U.S. history, political science, law for approximately 20 years. And in my time in the classroom, I'm telling my students, this theoretical model, this federal republic under which we live, and the way things as they are enshrined. Sorry, I see the pocket constitution, which is something I give to my students.
Sure, right.
But in that little pamphlet, it lays out the way things should be.
Mm-hmm.
And if you dig a little deeper, particularly in the Commonwealth, we also have an extraordinary constitution ourselves, which predates the federal constitution. And in there, it's pretty straightforward. It's supposed to be a government that derives its powers and of the people, and it should only engage in actions which benefit the common good. So I have been making this spiel for 20 years. And time again, I'll get the question, simple, straightforward question from my students. Then why is it not likely? Of course I answered it in the moment, but there was always in the back of my head, why? Why are things so screwed up?
Yeah, you know the answer yourself, but as I've been going along doing the show since 2008, I see that it's like, why are they? And some of the questions that I'm going to ask you, it's like, what are these guys thinking?
Exactly.
Are they just making this up off the top of their head now?
Right. I think we're at that point, to a degree. But I think what plays into the fact is that we do not, as citizens, are as knowledgeable as we should be, and we have a lot of apathy. I mean, tell me the last time, other than a presidential election, when voter turnout was higher than 50%.
True.
I won my second term in a local election when only 122 voters went to the ballot. I mean, granted, there was no challenge seats, but in a town where you have 6,000 registered voters, 122 decided to go and vote. It really is. So basically, I've been talking about this for so long and pondering what's going on, and I said, enough complaining, enough theorizing, let's throw my hat in the ring. let's see if I can get out there and do something good.
Good.
You know, I tell my students, if you can walk away from my classes learning one thing that you will retain for the rest of your life, because I know we all have teachers that we had in the past, there's that one thing you remember.
Sure.
I said, then you were a success. So ultimately, when I decided to pull the papers and throw my hat in the ring, that's my goal. I want to do one thing that has a significant benefit to the common people.
And you want to leave something behind, you know.
Yeah.
And you're going to be an old man someday, and you're going to have to look at your children and grandchildren, and they're going to ask you, what did you do, Grandpa?
Right,
You know,
exactly.
And like, this is why I do this. It's like, what am I going to leave behind? And I think what I've been doing and talking to all the candidates, it's been an incredible learning experience to me, and getting exposed to just the process and learning the basics of even our Constitution. I've been on this stint now where I'm reading biographies from presidents.
Yep.
I'm reading Roosevelt right now. I've gone through a whole bunch of them, and it's something I would never have engaged in. My life would have gone off in some other direction had I not decided in 2008 to decide to sit down one night behind the microphone with a friend of mine, and it was like, hey, you know, you're pretty good at this. Why don't you? So it's the same thing probably for you. It's like you never know until the whole thing could just go flash in the pan for you and you fall flat on your face, but you never know.
Well, see, that's it. It's I don't necessarily have anything to gain in that there's no one propping me up. There's no one promising me, you know, something better tomorrow.
Right.
You know, I have my professional career, I have my family, I have my house. I'm pretty well set in life, but this is just something that, you know, I feel deep down inside that we need more people willing to take a chance.
Getting to what I said, these guys just making this up, I found, while I was here waiting, I found a Gun Owners Action League newspaper. And as a lawyer, you're in Goal and you're in NRA. What is with these guys? Getting to my original question, are these guys just making this up off the top of their head? I mean, they're making gun ownership in the state of Massachusetts more and more difficult. Some of the legislation that I read in this newspaper over here, it's flat. I know it's tough in that they're looking to just basically take the guns away, but the way they're doing it is so sinister. So go ahead. As a board member, NRA, and a lawyer, what do you see?
Well, we'll start off first off with what our Constitution, the Commonwealth says. In Article 1 in the Bill of Rights, it states that we as citizens, and of course I'm paraphrasing, that we as citizens basically have the legal right to defend ourselves and to defend our property. Then later on in Article 17, it reaffirms that right by granting us the right to keep and bear arms for what the Constitution states as the common good. Essentially, when the framers of our Constitution, of course the biggest man involved was John Adams, penciled our Constitutional Commonwealth, he recognized the fact that we as citizens have the ultimate right to keep ourselves, our homes, our families safe. But obviously, in the Commonwealth, the government in particular, the majority party has forgotten that. In part, I believe it's because most, well, I suppose there's no test required to be a legislature in the Commonwealth. You know, if you can get enough votes, get up on Beacon Hill, you know, you can serve as a representative.
Yeah.
But what would happen if they had to take a test? Do they actually know the words that are in the Constitution? Probably not.
I never thought of that.
And
there's
now,
no example. There's gun owners, you've got to go through hook and crook and stand on your head and spin around.
And particularly with the new legislation that's passed, where even if you were able to obtain a license, you know, the local Clio has the ability to take you to court to possibly strip you of that right.
Really?
Right, and to me, that's just sinister. Now, I'm not a big conspiracy theory guy, but this to me wafts of tyranny. You know, this is the government essentially trying to position itself so that way it is the sole dispensary of protection. Well, I know the police use that motto, serve and protect, but they want people to have to go to them because it justifies their existence.
It's a velvet glove type of tyranny.
Oh, it
It's
is.
to help you.
Right,
It's
exactly.
for your own good.
Exactly.
Don't worry, we'll take care of it.
Without a doubt. Because I think they are afraid of an empowered population. Because ultimately, if the people are empowered and they're doing things for themselves, you know, they don't need all this legislation, which, of course, many people, particularly in the majority party, as I mentioned, feel justified their existence.
Exactly. One of the biggest things, yeah, government is huge, government is big. It seems like they're almost living for themselves, acting for themselves. I was talking to Karen Anderson on the show, sitting here right where you are, and she said they're talking to each other. It's like politicians are elected only to serve other politicians.
Right.
And because of the massive growth of the government, I mean, I said earlier, we have legislators doing whatever they want with no regard to the citizens. What are you hearing when you go out and talk to voters or go to events and you're talking to people? What are they saying in regards to that?
Absolute disgust. They're just fed up, and there's also a sense of hopelessness, that things are so bad, as the typical person perceives it, that they feel that they can't do anything about it.
True.
So that's a real problem, because again, it goes back to that apathy that I think we see reflective in the polls. You know, why am I going to bother vote? What difference does it make? They're not going to do what I want anyways. So essentially, we have people that are getting into government for their own gain, not respecting the interests and the well-being of people.
Sure. You took the taxpayer protection pledge. I was reading your site, and I read it in your response in the Yankee Shopper concerning the spending priorities. And basically, you believe that cities and towns know best what to do with their money, and that's no brainer. Yet, as our economy tanks, legislators want more tax dollars to spend on pet projects, not job creation. So I want you to expand on your response from the Yankee Shopper and tell us about the taxpayer protection pledge.
Yeah, all right, well, we'll start off with my response to the Yankee Shopper. As a candidate, which was something that, I'll be honest with you, I really wasn't aware, but how many sources that are out there that send you questionnaires, they want to know what you're all about. You know, I figured a lot would come from the typical media, but of course there's interest groups involved as well. So, you know, we're answering everything that, you know, that we can, and we're posting it on the internet just so we can have full transparency. But the most recent one was from the Yankee Shopper, and they basically asked us two questions. What are our, as a candidate, spending priorities, and what could we do for the local economy? Well, I'm very, I don't want to say old school because it's a very tired phrase, but I kind of...
We are old school.
Yeah, in that I really, really believe that government doesn't know what's best for us. That particularly what we have in the Commonwealth, where Beacon Hill has almost an absolute monopoly on power and authority, that the component parts, the municipalities, are often ignored.
Right.
So, for instance, if your town needs a new school, you have to go to the state first to get approval. And if the state doesn't like your plan, it really is. So if the state doesn't like your plan, you'll get rejected.
And here we got this huge $1 billion convention center going on. Again, I was talking to Karen Anderson and a few others when I mentioned that, and they're like, who's going to go to this thing?
Exactly.
Whereas $1 billion could help, you know, dozens of towns and communities that are struggling, especially out where I was on my vacation out of Western Mass. There's rural towns up there. There's a lot of unemployment out there.
Absolutely.
And they're spending $1 billion for a convention center that no one's going to be able to afford to go to. If you and I were going to have a concert or go to a concert or an event there, it would cost us like $200 or $300 for a ticket.
Oh yeah,
just to show up.
Just to get in the door, then you have all the associated fees of us coming from the central part of the Commonwealth.
$17 beers and $18 hot dogs.
Exactly. So they really lost sight on the fact that Massachusetts isn't just Boston. You know, Massachusetts is comprised of 351 municipalities. And if Beacon Hill would, I don't want to say loosen the reins, but basically allow the cities and towns more discretionary power to allow them to address their own needs. First and foremost, I think the overall well-being of us as taxpayers and residents and citizens would definitely improve.
Exactly. And one of the things that was in some of the other stuff that you answered, the 2/3 majority. In order for a tax increase to occur, it must be a 2/3 majority vote, not just a simple majority vote.
Yeah, I think
an amendment. What happened to that amendment?
I think that would be brilliant. Yeah, absolutely.
In the trash, however.
Without a doubt, because again, that's scary to those enshrined in Beacon Hill.
Another thing too is it's the accountability thing. I worked on the gasoline tax petition, and the argument that I found very persuasive to get people to sign was it's accountability. If you knew that Representative so-and-so voted last year to raise your taxes, Representative so-and-so doesn't get voted in next year.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Whereas this automatic thing removes all accountability from everybody. It just has automatic stuff. And again, this 2/3 majority idea is a fantastic idea because 2/3 of them practically everybody has to be on board. They've all got to agree that this is it. It's not like that now.
No, because you know as well as I do that there's gamesmanship.
Mm-hmm.
So if, for instance, with the current procedures that we have where taxes passed by a simple majority, if you have representatives that are being challenged in their districts, maybe it's not a safe district, you know, the party leadership can essentially, some of the majority party can say, all right, well, you're allowed to vote against the measure.
Just to
You know,
hold your seat.
just to hold
You don't
your
want to
seat.
get people upset.
Exactly. So it's self-preservation. But I think if you were to increase it up to a supermajority, then you would force more and more legislatures to put their name down next to it.
Exactly.
And it would also ultimately protect us.
Exactly. It
From
would.
things like not only the gas tax, but remember the computer software tax?
Yes, the tech tax.
And they had no idea even what it was.
Sure, and well, that actually went the way of the dinosaur itself.
Right, I know. Once they actually sat down and read the bill.
Now, you had said earlier that a lot of people today aren't as knowledgeable about our government, the way the Constitution is. Of course, you know about Common Core, and you work in the school.
I do.
So you know exactly where I'm coming from when I even mention the word Common Core. But as a teacher, and you've gone into, you go into your class, students come in, we know about the dumbing down of our education system. You said you've been doing this for well over 20 years. Have you seen a downward slide? Like 20 years ago, when you walked into your classroom and your students walked in, was it a different caliber of students then as opposed to the caliber of students you're seeing today?
Absolutely, it's night and day.
They're not
It really
even
is.
prepared.
Not even
These are the reports I'm reading that people come into college and it's like the professors have to almost do like remedial high school algebra and
Yeah, yeah.
English just to get you ready for my course.
Right. At the two colleges that I work at, I think, I don't know the total amount, but I think upwards of 30 to 40% of incoming freshmen have to take remedial classes just to get themselves up to the collegiate level. And of course, if they're going to spend a year or two getting to where they should have been when they walked in the door, that means the rest of their time there, they're always lagging behind.
Right.
And it really is a challenge. And for me, I started teaching right around the time ed reform was first put through back in the early 90s. And I saw the change almost immediately. In fact, ironically, I had someone who I knocked on their door send me an email just the other day about this very question. And then I told them my personal experience. When I first got into teaching, it was, as I'm assuming how it was when you were in school, it's called tracking, where students of like abilities were grouped together and they went through the curriculum at the same time, receiving appropriate instruction based upon the collective ability of the group. You had the upper class, you had the middle class, and you had the lower group. The lower group received remedial instruction in school.
Sure.
K to 12.
Right.
The middle group,
Kids that were always having trouble, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The middle group is the group that typically the kids that fall between the cracks. They were able to maybe get a standard level of instruction, but in some instances maybe push them up, which would allow them to rise. You know, because you want to encourage the students to be successful. You want to encourage them to achieve. And then of course you have the high achievers, which, you know, you give them anything and they'll take it and they'll run.
I had friends like that. It's like they would pass exams. I didn't study. Well, they just, it's like they just had it.
Exactly. But with those kids, you could actually increase the pace and bring them farther along than you could maybe the middle or the lower group. Well, with that reform, they did away with that. And they invented something that's referred to as inclusion, when kids of all different abilities were lumped together. I had the first year, because I was up in Leominster Public Schools at this time, the first year that inclusion came in, and I'm not exaggerating, I had half kids that were all A students and half that received remedial attention through special education. Which group do I teach to?
And how do I do this?
Exactly. If I teach to the top, I lose the bottom. If I teach to the bottom, I lose to the
You
top.
spent all summer getting your curriculum and your whole game plan ready. Now these kids walk in and it's like, wait, I gotta redo this.
Exactly. And
Or I have to do two of them now. I've got to have the one that are for the good kids, and then I got to figure something out down south for the kids who need remedial.
Right. And nowadays, because I still have friends that are classroom teachers, it's worse because it's not just that split. It's you have kids of the whole spectrum, different learning styles, different learning abilities, which forces the teachers to teach to each student individually. Well, if you have one adult in a room full of 25 kids, and you have them for 45 minutes to an hour. How do you do it?
You can't do it.
So the end result is you try to teach to the C group. You water everything.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
You've got to water the whole thing down.
Exactly. Because what you want to do is you try to attack the bell curve. You want to try to be able to get as many kids at a time as you can. So we're losing the overachievers. And of course the underachievers, they need help. They can't even work to the C level.
That's unbelievable.
And those kids that were in the middle, that previously you possibly might be able to elevate, you're going to lose them as well.
So I see what they're trying to do, make it easier for everybody, don't let people feel left out. But what's ended up happening by default, you're losing practically everybody.
Right. And as you lose them, you also lose the ability to courses, which means specialized courses. Civics, for example. Concentrated
I think
efforts.
that's fun.
Yeah, it's very rare.
We had American government I got out of high school in '82. I remember American government. It wasn't constitutional stuff. It was just the nooks and crannies of how
really like an intro to poli-sci.
Right.
Yep.
But that I know for a fact that's gone. That's gone too.
Oh, absolutely.
And back in my day, that was just a simple American government course.
Right. And
none of that exists.
And another thing that impacted me personally was when NEASC, which is the New England Association of Schools or something. It's the body that goes around and gives high schools and colleges accreditation. They began around the beginning of the last decade pushing for a world history focus as opposed to an American history focus. So not only are we losing kids, not only are we teaching them dumbed down material, but they're getting into college, at least from my own perspective, not knowing anything about what makes our nation special.
And they're not encouraged that.
No.
And between television, media in general, there isn't that emphasis on Americanism, especially American exception.
Oh yeah. I mean, like you know, I was a child of the '80s when Ronald Reagan was president. You know, everything was USA, red, white, and blue.
Right.
You know, Bruce Springsteen, all the rest of the Rocky movies. And now you open up the newspaper, you put on the TV, even watch movies, and America's bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're not.
Do you get that from your students?
It's a non-appreciation. They don't understand how exceptional we are. Because they'll come forward and they'll talk about the negative things. Okay, slavery was bad. Everybody knows that.
It was 150 years ago. Get over it.
But exactly. But you know, with very few exceptions, okay, there's been issues for immigrant groups, but it's like that in every single country. And you know, after a generation or two, they assimilate.
Sure.
And everyone is better off. Well, the kids in school don't get this message about how unique we are. Because we are just another country.
Do you think it's that
just like everybody
that's
else?
Instantaneousness that youth have today? They want it. It's like their cell phones. They click it and they think it's
oh yeah. Well, understanding history and understanding government, it actually takes time to open up a book. It takes patience. You have to read
and understand.
You have to understand. You have to analyze. You have to think about it. You have to go back, reread it, and it's just not there.
Get a second opinion here and there too.
Because also so much of their time is learning the basic stuff, like math and English. That's not important.
What's the Sutton School Committee? What things are they struggling and arguing with as far as park testing, Common Core?
What we've done,
What are you grappling with that?
Well, I am obviously against Common Core. I think the idea of allowing Washington, D.C. to regulate, I mean, granted it started in the States, but now that D.C. has taken over, the idea that Washington, D.C. is going to know how to best educate our children in the 18th Worcester District and elsewhere throughout the Commonwealth, it's absolutely foolishness. So whenever we bring it up, I am always like looking for ways to put it off, making sure that that secondary possibilities or options are thought about before implementation. Because ultimately, all the new curriculum that's coming down is manufactured by these textbook companies.
Yeah.
And very little of it's actually proofread. You know, when you see the things on Facebook, okay, you know, that's very popular and that's the trend, and I'm sure those are the most extreme examples of, you know, problems that don't make sense. Well, my daughter for the first year, who's in fifth grade this past year, started bringing home these Common Core worksheets. And I have multiple degrees. My wife has multiple degrees, and you know what they are asking.
Exactly.
And I'm saying to myself, my God, if this is what the kids are going to receive, they're going to tune out because of the impossibility of completing the assignment. So just let me finish if you don't mind. So when I was having a conversation with the superintendent when Common Core first started coming in, I looked at him right in the eyes and I said, where would you be if you learned under Common Core? Would you be a superintendent of a public school system? And there was no response. So to me, that's the most telling thing. Those who are involved in the education process know that Common Core is awful, but no one is saying anything about it.
My own kids, when they were growing up, Dad helped me with my history. Dad, and my math, I always answer my wife. She's very good about that. But anything with social studies, math, culture, even science, biology, and stuff. But it was the history that always got me. I would read the question, read the little context. Oh, what did so and so mean by this? And I'd be like, that's just wrong. That's not what happened, and that's the wrong question to ask for the little scenario that they put up there and they want you to think about. And what would end up happening is my kids would come home and they weren't getting warm. I can't do my homework. We're not getting warm because we're not giving the right answers. I said, but these are the right answers. Right. And I would go in for parent-teacher conferences. Well, we're looking for specific responses to gauge where the child is learning, what words they're picking up. Okay, but that's fine. I understand where you're coming from as a professional teacher. You want to gauge my child, make sure they're recognizing sentences and context and meaning. It's just false information.
Right.
That's what you're doing here.
Well, I've also seen instances very similar to what you're referring to with your own kids, where teachers are teaching subject matter that maybe they're not prepared to teach. And so what they do is they rely upon the textbook questions and the answer. So they'll take the student's response and match it up with the answer given by the textbook. And if there's a difference, then, maybe they're not grasping it as well.
That's unbelievable.
Because let's not forget, over the last 20 years, as public education has been dumbed down, who are the teachers that are currently teaching?
I wrote a while ago in a piece for my blog that not only is that very possible, if not real scenario, what you're having now is you have students going into the school now that are children of the parents who also have received a dumbed down education.
Right.
So this caliber of IQ every year is dropping. And you're right. Teachers getting in that are younger. They're college graduates, 20-somethings, early 30s.
I'm not going to fault anyone for getting an education because it is a wonderful field.
But even they come from that new generation of
exactly.
lower
expectations. And even though they're going to try to put their best foot forward, there's gaps, there's deficiencies, which they themselves might not even be aware of. But if they can't see it, they can't improve, which obviously is going to be detrimental to the well-being.
Let's shift gears a little bit here. The militarization of our police force. What's Sutton looking like now with the police? They got MRAPs and SWAT teams?
No. We do have a couple of new SUVs that go through town. We have the cruisers, but no hardcore military.
We haven't seen that yet.
No, I haven't seen that yet. But I know it's coming because of the amount of hardware that is awash that's currently for sale. And I know the federal government is selling.
Free.
I know, exactly. I was going to say at reduced or free rates. And to me, that is terrible because that speaks to, again, getting back to the founding fathers, the idea of a standing military, which was something that they were terrified of, which, bring it all the way back to the Second Amendment, that's the reason why we have the Second Amendment for the common defense.
Yes, it's the people that are supposed to defend their neighborhoods, their cities, their towns.
Exactly.
They're not supposed to have this militarized, this military running around in the streets.
Exactly.
The police force, historically there was a piece, I should have brought it, I wrote the question, didn't bring the piece with me. Very limited power up until about, even during the gangster days of the 20s and 30s. Very, very limited power of the police. They were quite literally there to show up after the fact and secure a crime scene until the investigators and everybody else got there. police quite literally directed traffic, helped those ladies across the street, walked the beat, make sure the drunks weren't laying all over the place.
Well,
It was very, very limited.
The motto says serve and protect. They're serving community. They're kind of protecting well-being. But today, actually when I was in law school, I did an independent study on an argument to increase or at least bring into Massachusetts the castle doctrine as they have it down in Florida. And one of the things that I use as evidence is the response time.
Could you repeat, what is that? The what doctrine?
The expanded castle doctrine.
Okay, go
that
ahead.
they have down in Florida. Basically, in Florida, they passed an expansion of what we have in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, in theory, you have a right to defend your castle.
I see what you're saying.
So if someone breaks in your house, you have a right to take out a gun and not retreat. Well, in Florida, they made it so that way if any individual was in a legal situation, you're walking down the street and you're attacked. You don't have a legal duty to retreat. You can defend yourself. Well, when I was in law school, I wrote a paper basically saying that we need to expand it because if you are a citizen, if you are a legal resident, and you are doing nothing wrong, and you are attacked, again, our Constitution gives us the right to defend our lives and our property. At the same time, I also argued it should be the same with businesses as well. And one of the things that I used was response time. Response time. I live 4 miles away from the police station in Sutton. And of course, I live on, if you're familiar with the town, I'm on the other side of 146. So granted, they now have the clickers where they can change the lights. But still, in order for a police car to get from where the station is to my house, if I was to call 911, you're talking maybe 5 minutes. Somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. Well, what's going to happen if there's someone in my house? Anything. Exactly. So, it should be seconds.
There's seconds.
Simultaneously in Massachusetts, you could be sued civilly. So even if you're not prosecuted criminally, you could be sued for wrongful death.
Right.
Which could...
crippling the criminal for life.
Right, exactly, because you harm them.
Yeah.
And to me, I also argued against that. I think that's ridiculous. If you're in your own home, you should be able to protect yourself because ultimately, again, I love police, I completely respect what they do. They cannot keep us safe in all times and situations.
And this is one of the things I was reading in the newspaper is that, we can pass all these laws, we can make the regulations stricter. There was an article in here, I remember the line, it said, but it doesn't make us bulletproof.
Right, oh yeah, exactly.
You can pass, again, all the laws, regulations, all you want. There's still going to be the crazy person out there, and it's not going to protect you. You can't go up to him and say, oh, this is a gun-free zone. Actually, he's kind of hoping you're going to say it's a gun-free zone, because that means you're unarmed.
I don't want to get down to the macabre, but I think there's a definite correlation with the fact that some of the most violent gun acts in our country in recent histories have occurred in gun-free zones.
Yeah, zero tolerance areas.
Yep.
Exactly. I was talking with a guy, Dan McGonigal, on the show, and he and I both, while I introduced it, he completely concurred. I call it the crazy person in the room scenario. If you're a crazy person and you have a gun, and you walk into a room and there's 10 people in that room, and your intention as a crazy person is to gun them all down. Well, if we have an open armed society, that crazy person, as crazy as he is, knows I might get 1 or 2 shots off before all of them pull their guns out and blow me away.
Oh, exactly.
Talk about a deterrent.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas, flip the coin over, crazy person walks into the room, he knows nobody in that room is armed. Pop, 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 pop.
Yep.
Pop, pop, pop.
And chances are the people are not going to know how to respond because guns have been made so icky. There was once a point in our time when kids actually learned gun safety in schools.
They had actual shooting classes.
They did.
Exactly.
They did. So the kids came to not only, I don't want to say appreciate, but understand what they are capable of doing. And there was no stigma attached. So, if Grandpa...
You took your archery course and your marksmanship course.
Exactly.
And that was on your report card at the end of the year.
Without a doubt. And unlike a video game, when you took that class, there was no reset button. So you come to appreciate the fact that these are real tools that can cause serious harm.
Again, now we don't do that. Again, that IQ level, lower and lower and lower.
Exactly.
Getting back to taxes and businesses. It's stagnant here. Business is stagnant here in Massachusetts. Our population growth is flat, if not negative, from 1 or 2
That's one
years.
of the reasons why we're losing members of Congress. Remember, we've lost 2 seats in the last 2
because of our population. And part of that is because also there's no business starting up here, and everybody knows this, but it's kind of a rhetorical question. Are these people doing this on purpose because they're anti-business, or are they responding to some sort of constituency group? What is their end result of passing more regulations, more taxes, more restrictions on businesses, while in the same time getting out there on the campaign trail, I'm all for jobs and bringing jobs back? How does that mesh together?
It really is. I mean, it's. I suppose you have to bring some of those tax and spend Democrats, sit them in the chair and ask them directly.
Right.
Because like you said, it makes no sense. You know, in order to get to C, you have to go A and B.
How's industry in Sutton?
There is no industry in Sutton.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I moved to Sutton for a reason. Sutton traditionally has been a more farming type community. And as I tell some of my friends, and they don't believe me, we have one light in town. And we have 2 restaurants that are open past lunchtime. And both of them are pizza places. So, I mean, we have some business coming in.
Oh, we're open till past lunch.
Yeah. We have Tony's Pizza right on the highway. We have Jim's Pizza, which is down near my house. But beyond that, you know, it's
a small, sleepy town.
And unfortunately, most of the farms have gone away.
Yeah.
So it's become a sleepy.
And again, that brings it back to more taxes, regulations. Why keep farming if I'm not going to make money? I'm just getting taxed, and now I have all these other regulations I got to apply to.
And speaking of which, I am friends with one of the farming families in town, and I had a conversation with them just the other day about the fact that they need to buy a new generator because they have cows. And so in order to keep the cows safe, warm in the wintertime, God forbid there's ever another storm and power goes out.
Sure.
They have an engine in there that costs them $3,500. In order to replace it, with all the regulations, all the headaches, all the confusion, I mean, they're trying to go to solar just to get off the grid. But in order to replace it, it's going to cost them upwards of $100,000. It really, that's insanity. It really is. And it's because...
And they can't just go down to Home Depot and get one of those Generac generators that 2 guys can pick up?
Well, unfortunately, they would need a lot more than that because again,
it's a big unit.
Exactly. It's not like a homestead. So when I heard that, it's like, that's what's wrong with Massachusetts. And in fact, my son likes saying it, and I'll give him credit, my son Justin, he's 13. He came up with a nice little tagline for me to use where he basically says, Massachusetts is a place where small businesses go to die. It's true. It really is. Because when you hear about things like that, I was talking to a woman who owns a pet supply store, small, not a chain, down in Webster. Same thing, with all the rules and regulations that she has to follow, all the paperwork that she has to file. Heck, just for her to file her taxes, she has to pay $400 quarterly because she's an incorporated business. When you hear about those stories, it's like, my God, how do these places keep their doors open? And ultimately, it seems that the more that the state does, for whatever reason, why they're doing it, they're just putting more and more anchors around these small businesses' shoulders, forcing them underwater.
They're forcing them underwater, and when you were just talking there, it reminded me of when I went to film. There was a hearing right over here at the Union Station for the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, talking about how they're going to all raise the rates, everything's going up. Well, you're looking at anywhere from a 50 to 75%. It's already in play now. It went through on July 1st. And I'm not going to get into the minutiae of everything, but one of the things, when I covered the story and wrote about it for the Worcester Herald, one of the things I had mentioned in there is what this is going to do is it's going to target poor and low-income people. Just like the regulations target small businesses or struggling businesses or sole proprietorships, you know, I'm going to call them small and low-income, I'm going to call them poor and low-income businesses also, because they're basically in that same notch.
Because many of them are just living like most people, check to check, just trying to keep the doors open.
Exactly. And so what's going to happen with the DMV fees is you're going to see more people driving around illegally. And when I said that, I didn't mean that because these people are criminals. But when you are looking at a $50 inspection sticker to a single mother on welfare, that's food for the week or getting my car inspected, right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I gotta get my insurance re-upped. There's $1,500. That's a month's rent.
Yeah.
So what it's doing, it's turning people into criminals is what it's doing. And it's criminality by just draining us dry of our money.
Eventually, that's going to happen. It's going to get to the point where more and more people are going to want to do the right thing, but they're just not going to be able to afford it. And that's going to create one of two situations. Either they're going to become more dependent on government, which, again, not wanting to wear the tinfoil hat, not conspiracy theory, but part of me wonders if that's part of the intent. Because if there are more people that need government, then those in power can serve their needs and their say.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it's also going to force those people who can to leave. Which, as you mentioned, we are one of the few states in this country that population has either dipped or has been stagnant.
That's right.
People are not coming here.
They're not.
Because they know that, I know the tagline is Taxachusetts.
But it's true.
But it really is, and it's a shame.
It really is. And again, when I was out in Western Mass on my vacation, I remarked to my wife, I said, you know, there's really nothing out here. There's really no big jobs, no industry. You've got to drive a half an hour just to get to the grocery store. And, you know, if we're going to like start taxing people on the automatic gas, and there's another thought that they're going to try to start taxing by the mile. Let's say you live and we drive by a house. Let's say you live in that house and we drove by. Now, when was the last time we were in the center of town? She's like, oh, I don't know, about a half an hour ago. I was like, now that person has to drive from that house, however many miles we just traveled, a half an hour just to go and get gas or go to the store.
The market, right.
Or whatever. And now these people are going to be taxed on the miles that they drive. And now guess what? When they're done, they're going to turn around and drive back again.
Exactly. And also think about all of those families, middle-class families, that are able to keep their mortgages paid and the lights on, that live in all the sleeper towns in the middle part of the state that commute to Boston. Mm-hmm. So it's going to impact the people out in the western part of the state that are more rural, but it's also going to force those that maybe have a job. And then suddenly they're going to become, okay, they're working, but they're never going to be able to get ahead. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like what we were talking about earlier with the dumbing down of education. They're just dragging everyone down to the lowest common denominator.
What's your plan? You get in, what's your plan?
Well, what I want to do is obviously we need to stop the regulation. I know one of the, it's a nice little motto, but it's one of the things the Democrats on the national level use, the Republicans in the party of no. But
no,
we need that.
No, I believe it.
We are the party.
We
Men and women up on Beacon Hill that will look at the majority party and just say, no, we need to stop. That is the first stage. Working as best we can to stop the foolishness that is never ending. And then start pulling things back.
Peel back, right?
Exactly. Little things. Okay, how long ago did we as voters in the Commonwealth vote to have the income tax go back down to 5%?
2000, I think you said 2000, 2001, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, it was great that we got
and it was voted on, and it hasn't happened.
I know. Exactly, because they know better than we do. So little things like that. Let's make government work in a way that improves the well-being of everybody. Not just the little special interest groups that are getting their, slices of the pork barrel that they like to throw in every single budget, but let's do things to help everybody. If you lower the taxes across the board, you're helping rich folks, but you're helping poor as well. Mm-hmm. You're helping the businesses. You're helping everybody have a little more money in their pocket. And I'll tell you, what are you going to do when you have a couple more bucks in your pocket?
You're either going to save it, invest it, or go out and buy something and spend it.
And then you're going to have the trickle down.
That's it.
You're either going to better yourself, you're going to prepare for a rainy day, which means if something catastrophic happens, you're not going to be dependent on the need for handouts, or you're going to spread the wealth. You're going to go to the little business. Maybe you can go out to eat again. I mean, how many restaurateurs you hear of people saying it's not like it was? People don't go out.
We don't.
Because you can't afford to anymore.
Even my wife and I have been together 18 years, and when our kids were first born and we first started, we both had decent jobs, and we would take the kids out, go to McDonald's, go to the movies, go to the play places, and we did all that. It was a little pricey, but we could afford it. Right. We could budget it and say, well, let's think about going here in a couple of weeks. We'd go to Six Flags, or we'd plan a little trip. This thing that my wife and I just did when we went camping was like, let's just go camping. It's the cheapest thing, and let's just you and I go.
Right.
Well, the kids are grown; they don't want to go out anyway. But we would, again, as we were driving out there, we had that conversation, and we came to that conclusion. It's like, you know, if could we have done it? She's like, we couldn't, if we had to start now with new kids and everything, she's like, no.
I know.
She's like, we couldn't do it.
I mean, just the cost of everything. Whether it be
we both worked,
formula.
And we both worked 2 jobs. She always worked 2 jobs, and I had to have my contracting thing that I did on the side, or I worked for the hotel. And but even that, there would be days where we'd be like, no, I'm broke too. Well, we get paid Friday. Well, it's Wednesday. Well, that's the way it goes.
Right.
But now, you can't do it. I don't go out, she and I don't go out. And getting back to what I said about turning people into criminals, I mean, these people are just gonna, I don't know what people are gonna do.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to think that it's going to get to the point of absolute desperation, but you can see it.
We're getting close.
Again, I'm going door to door, going through the district, and that's the one thing that's resonating. They don't want new government programs. They don't want, new ideas. What they want is more, the ability to keep more of what they earn, so that way they can take care of themselves and their family.
What's next for you? Where are you heading out? What are your next events? And you are coming on the 30th.
I am definitely coming on the 30th, and I'm definitely looking forward to that. And I love things like that. The list keeps getting longer and longer.
It does. It's getting bigger.
I think it's just going to be fantastic. Not only for me personally to have a chance to meet some of the other candidates from across the state, but just as an event as a whole, so that way more and more people can realize that there are a lot of people that are of like mind, like yourself and I, that really, really want to stop the insanity and start bringing back an attention to the well-being.
And what I said earlier, peel back. So anyway, what's next? What your new events? Tell us what your calendar is.
Well, let me see. I'll be honest with you, I didn't bring my calendar, so I don't really know anything specifically off the top of my head. But something, I'm doing it the old-fashioned way. I'm not the party candidate, because again, there's 3 of us in the race. And one of my opponents is, been working closely with the party. Because to me, again, I've always been politically active, but I don't like that partisan rhetoric. So what I've been doing is it's more grassroots. I've been going door to door. I have a group of former students that are working with me. How about that? I'm a really bad guy, so much so that I have students who graduated that wanted to come back to help me do this. So what we've been doing is we've been pounding the pavement.
Yeah.
Pretty much going door to door, talking to everyone.
I talk to a lot of people. The seated incumbents, I don't know what Ryan's doing. I'm trying to get him on the show. But some of the things that I've had, seated incumbents, they're relying on their Democrat donorship, the DNC money, their big media advertisements. All of you guys, everyone I've talked to, is all doing the same thing. They're knocking door to door. They're showing up at every event they can shake a stick at.
Yep.
And I think that's fantastic.
Right.
That's the way to run a campaign.
I think at this point, because I started door knocking around April, spring break, I think I've personally knocked on about 2,000 doors in the district.
Sure.
And what I mean, me personally, I don't have operatives.
No.
There's no one out for the party representing
You
me,
and a couple of
passing
guys.
out literature. Exactly. So if one of my interns or aides, if you want to call them, knocks on the door, guess where I am? I'm next door.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to talk to me, they'll grab me.
I'll be over in 2 minutes.
Exactly.
Sure.
And it's just been great. It's been positive, and I can't tell you how many doors people have opened the doors and said, no one has ever come to my house before.
I hear that too.
So to me, I think that's more important than political rallies where, okay, you're going to bring your family and your friends. We had an event the other night, just a small fundraiser, and we had, of course, family and friends there. But I had one of my good friends bring out a lot of the businesses that he worked with. So again, I got to talk to people who are running businesses and get a different perspective. But again, it was a small event, and to me, that's enough. To me, I would rather have this personal connection, this relationship. And again, just as an example of how different I'm doing things, I'm giving out not only my email address and the Facebook page and website, but I'm also giving out cards to people who I speak with that has my personal cell phone number on it. No games. I don't have an office. I don't have a secretary. I'm giving them my personal cell phone number. And I've had people call me just to see if it was for real. But if they call me, I will answer it. Because to me, it's not about this partisan shell game. Let's vote for me because I'm a Republican because Republicans are great. Or let's vote for me because I'm a Democrat, Democrats are great. No, we don't need that. We need representatives. We need real people and we need more people realizing that there are many of us that are like them, real people, homeowners, taxpayers, that just want to do something that's good.
Getting back to the grassroots thing, and you and I agree, it's a great idea. I love the way that all the candidates are doing that. Do you think that you guys should hold on to that model once you're seated?
Oh, absolutely.
Like once you're seated, don't just sit up at Beacon Hill all damn day long.
Oh,
but
no,
come,
not at all.
Head out. Let's get together. We'll head out and such for next week.
You know, one of the things that I've been doing is what I call eating around the district. I'm going into the restaurants, I'm eating, and I'm not campaigning. Yeah, okay, I have my button on, and my helpers have their t-shirts on. But I'm not going in there saying, hi, my name's Jesse Limanek, I'm candidate for such and such office. It's, hi, I'm coming in to eat. What's good on the menu? You know, so
you're showing up.
I'm showing up. And to me, whether it's showing up at someone's house, showing up to an event that's going on in the town, like one of my favorite things to do is in town at the local Legion Hall is trivia night. You know, I don't go and I don't campaign. I sit down on a table and we play trivia. It's fun. You know, it's being there.
Yeah. But do you find yourself in a conversation from, hey Jesse, yeah, I saw this in the paper the other day. But do you find yourself just somehow stumbling into a conversation?
Some people do, but others understand, okay, he's just a regular guy that wants to hopefully do some good. So it's pleasant. I mean, we talk about Red Sox, like all of us, you know, in the state of misery of Red Sox Nation, but you know, football season's coming up, things like that. Oh, you know, how's your dog? How's your family? And of course, the political questions come as well. But generally, you know, we're trying to keep it. We're trying to. Again, to keep it my son, we're keeping it real. Exactly.
Jesse, thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jesse Limanek out of the 18th Worcester District. What cities and towns exactly does that cover?
Sutton, Douglas, Webster, and half of Oxford. Precincts 1 and 4.
Excellent. Thanks again.
All right, thank you very much.